bell housing, not a lot to say on that really. There's two bearings to fit in. Primary bearing, just a plate either side, pull that one in until it sits up to that shoulder, so that's easy to locate. Lay shaft bearing, pull that one in, then that's located by, get that off, three bolts at the back on a plate, and the front plate that sits on it has got its own shoulder on it, so that will locate that into the housing in its correct position. And then that's just locked off by the tab washer. Horseshoe tab, nip the bolts up, bend the tabs over, job done. Bearings in position. Lay shaft bearing is retained by the three bolts, lock washer, bend up the tabs. There's no torque settings for these, so I normally just nip them up to the same torque as the front cover should be, which is around 22 pounds, I think. The main bearing is secured by a shoulder on the front, and its retaining plate at the back. All that's left to do is drive in the pinion and put the circlip on. Pinion in place. It does need a little bit of persuading. You need a big mallet. I'm lucky enough I've got a big leather mallet. Washer, circlip as a retainer, and that's it. You do need to put the circlip on properly, that's for sure. That's all we can do at the moment for that, because once you put it all back on the gearbox, you've then got to put the lay shaft bolt in, torque that up, put the cover on with a new oil seal, job done. Occasionally, when you change your oil, you'll get one of these come out with you, and you'll think, oh, where's that come from? What it is, your 3rd, 4th synchro box is centralised by these 3 springs, and they are those sitting in there. They'll just hold it central while your selector's on this central piece. As it runs forwards and back, it just centralises that into its appropriate gear. They were on this, but I don't know how long they've been on there, so I thought I'd replace them anyway. You will lose some skin off your knuckles, but it's worth doing while you're this deep into the box. Then it's time to put the box back together. Ooh, nearly finished. Once you've cut up the ends of your fingertips, putting the springs in, and you're happy with them in position, it's time for this to go back in. So you'll notice the ends are different. That end has got a recess before the teeth of the gear starts. That end has no recess. Recessed end needs to go in first. Jiggle about till it's on. Lay shaft end, gear and spacer. This is where it gets interesting now, because when you put the bell housing back in, the primary gear for the bell housing that sits on there sits behind the first gear on the lay shaft. So it takes a bit of jiggling. And what I would suggest that you do is, what I do is have a dry run first. Have a couple of practice runs at doing it before putting all the goo and the gasket on. Otherwise you'll waste a gasket and you'll swear a lot. One final thing is primary bearing needs to go on. I'll grease that up when it's ready to do, but for the time being it'll be a dry run mounting the bell. Okay, on with the tricky bit. I'll do my best to keep out of the camera's way, but it's not going to be easy. Needle roller bearing. How we're looking for, yeah, you can see all that. Needle roller bearing, I'm greased up. Clean that crap off. On the end of the main shaft. That sits in the back of the primary when it mounts up. So you've taken off the gear from the end of the lay shaft and the spacer. That's, yep, I'm in the way. So that needs to go on with enough space to put the gear in position behind the primary. And we're back to jiggling it down again, aren't we? We've got to engage the teeth on the inside of that cog. There we go. Centralise where that bearing sits. Might need a bit of leverage. Yep, I know I'm in the way, can't help it. Right, once that starts to drop, you then need to get in to get the distance piece in. I've never found an easy way of doing this yet. You'd think you'd be able to turn that out the way, wouldn't you? I need to lift it up a little bit. All we need is just enough space to get that onto the end of the shaft. Like that. Line up your lay shaft and jiggle it down. Hey! Which has obviously moved the gasket out of the way, but that can be addressed afterwards. He says with a smile. And see if you can get a bolt through. The stud go. There's one. Yeah, I'll let her go in a minute. Fantastic. There you go. It's as easy as that. Like I said, it's worth doing a couple of dry runs first, otherwise you just screw up a gasket and end up swearing at it a lot. Then all I can do at this stage, get that low enough for the camera. Of course you can, Malcolm. Lay chef bolt. Just put that in so you don't lose it for the time being. As I've said before, I'll get that one tightened up at the same time as I tighten up the two outputs on the transfer box. Give it a jiggle again, and job's a good one. Time to get ready for the big reconnection. In order to do that, you need to put the nut on, a special nut on the back end. There's a locator washer with two little cutouts in. That fits the two prongs on that, and that fits into the rear gear. Put the nut on, tighten it up to 85 pounds, then bend one of the locking tabs into one of the grooves. That end's done. Now, in order to tighten that up to 85 pounds, you've got to lock it up. So, easiest way of doing that is using the special tool you made earlier. And I find it easier if I use the selector, drop it back into third, hold the input still, tighten it up, click on your torque wrench, job done. Bend the tab in, and it's time for the big reconnection. Well, there's a lot of lifting, grunting, shoving, and put the two bits together. With a gasket, yeah, there's a gasket goes between these two. Don't see why, because all the oil normally transfers from the gearbox into the transfer box anyway, but a gasket would make it look so lovely. I think that'll do for this bit. Short and sweet. I'll get ready for the next bit.